So hi everyone, this is Sean from SSV, and today we're joined by Derek from Blockswap. We have an awesome session planned. Before we get into it, Derek, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. Hi, I'm Derek. I work with Blockswap across the commercial side of the company, and it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Sean.
Brilliant, thank you for coming. So let's begin by learning a bit more about Blockswap and what you're involved in. So could you tell us a bit more about Blockswap Network?
Yeah, so Blockswap Network is a research and development firm focusing on Ethereum. So we have quite a few different products throughout the Ethereum stack. This includes, an accounting layer for Ethereum, which I think we'll be getting into a bit more with staking. And then we also have two different restaking protocols coming to market in the next coming months. One our developers just finished last week, and the other one takes a little bit more time. Just really depends how much we want to get in there. But yeah, we have a bunch of different protocols and things that we're working on since we are research and development side of things.
Well, it's quite a lot. Now, I mean, when I did some research, I came across, things I'll probably ask you about in a bit about tokens, LSTs and things. And it's like you guys are like a bit of everything, no? Like the accounting, the tokens, there's so much going on there. So could you tell us a bit more about what you touched on, like with the accounting side?
Yeah, so we have this protocol called Stakehouse, and
Mm,
what it does is it basically allows for the accounting of consensus layer assets onto the execution layer. So basically validators on the execution layer, so inusable sort of assets. Now to bring this more simply and to kind of bring this into a little bit easier terms, this is a protocol that allows people to interact with their validator with through derivatives. And
mm,
a good example of kind of to get a mental model of how this works is people can build liquid staking derivatives networks on top of Stakehouse. That's probably one of its most commercial uses is to actually build liquid staking derivatives networks where people can offer their own derivatives or their own yield with a unified derivative across all LSD networks. So people can essentially, because there is this, accounting of the assets, there's no pooling and no pool of these derivatives, which means that each validator yields at a specific rate and that is maintained, and people are able to curate individual validators into their indexes. Sorry if that's kind of a long description for you, Sean.
it's cool. I mean, I'm fairly new to all this stuff as well. So I
Mhm,
think maybe it's good that you explain as clear as possible so everyone, right, can understand, not just the
mhm.
technical people. But yeah, no, it's really fascinating stuff. You said that people can build on top of the network. So I'm wondering how technical do you have to be to build on that, or is it like, limited amount of coordination involved? Okay, Derek, so would you tell us a bit about this fractional ownership and how that works with the nodes and validators?
Yeah, so because there is this accounting layer, people can just stake ETH directly to a specific validator, or they can go into a pool and it can get pulled into a specific validator. And what's so interesting about this is validators all yield at different rates. Some a little bit more than less, and not that that there's a ton of difference between, say, the top 10% of validators, but some people might be offline or for whatever reason, the rates are different. And what Stakehouse allows people to do is actually have fractional ownership and actually say that this is a derivative from this validator. And it only mints these derivatives when one is to one. So there's no extra derivatives floating around. It can always be reconciled. There's always this tie between the two, which is really great because then when somebody wants to come out and say, I want to pull out the ETH from my validator, they can actually pull out ETH from their specific validator, which is great. But it also just to take things a step further, when you've segmented the consensus layer assets, you've segmented these validators into different owners, but yet you've made them composable on the execution layer again. Protocols, if they're holding enough of the derivative, can say, hey, I want X, Y, and Z validator within my index because I'm holding the derivatives. I want the yield from these validators. I don't want the yield from these that are offline or whatever it is. I just want these here.
So are people owning the validators or the derivatives of them?
Yeah, people are owning the validators and the derivatives of them. Um, and the reason we call it fractional ownership is because you can actually take your derivative and tie it back to a specific validator. Or if you're a node operator, that's a node operator of, a specific validator kind of in the same
Mm.
stretch.
So if someone wants to take out whatever they've put into a node that or their validator, right? If
Mhm.
they want to take the money back out, what happens with the validator? And does it still stay as it is, or does it have to be completely kind of people? Everyone has to exit. You know what I mean? Or how does it work?
Yeah, I get what you're asking. How does it work if people want their piece of that validator back?
Hmm.
So if people are just holding the liquid staking token, the derivative ETH, they can always go and claim any sort of amount that's above 32 ETH on any validator. So they could say, hey, this validator's been yielding for a while, it has 33 ETH, they can go and claim that one. Now, on the other hand, if somebody wants to withdraw a large amount, or say they're the node operator, the node operators can initiate a withdrawal. And if they initiate a withdrawal, they will get their 4 ETH back that they put in. And everybody else who has put in a proportional amount will get their ETH back as well. And it'll be claimable in the protocol. Now, there's a few different ways that this can play out. I won't get into, I guess, all the technicals of it, but if people are already using their derivative ETH throughout DeFi, they won't get asked to claim ETH, which is usually a question that comes out.
Awesome stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So did you say is 4 ETH? That's like what's required for people to for the fractional ownership? Is that right?
Yeah, so there's the node operator puts up 4 ETH. And we're working, there's 0 ETH club, which is coming where these node operators could essentially put up 0 ETH because this amount doesn't really matter. But the validator is split up into two different types of tokens.
Mhm.
One is the slot token, and there's 8 of those, and that collects all of the MEV from the validator. So basically, if the validator's MEV is 2.5% APR, these tokens get about 10%, give or take. And then the other 24 ETH are this derivative ETH, this liquid staking token, which is just a vanilla ERC20, can be used anywhere. But this is provided by other people, or it could be the node operator as well. And this can be done. This yields at a little bit higher rate compared to issuance as well, just because it's 24 ETH is getting 32 ETH worth of rewards.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. It does got me thinking. So I've been noticing, like recently that there are a few of these organizations that are providing like limited capital bonds, for validators, like 4 ETH bonds and that. So what would you say differentiates Blockswap from these other competitors?
Yeah, so it's the composability. And so Stakehouse doesn't really have a bond. It takes 32 ETH and deposits it to the Ethereum deposit contract all at once.
Mhm.
So the amount that the node operator puts up is somewhat negligible, where it could be 0, it can be 1 ETH or 2 ETH or 3 ETH. We use 4 ETH on the onset just because it makes it easy sort of math, where there's, the node operator puts up 4 ETH, they get 50% of the MEV. Then somebody else can put up another 4 ETH for the other slot tokens and get the other 50% of the MEV. And then the other people can put in for the liquid staking as well. So the concept of this bond doesn't really exist here. It's all 32 ETH deposits that are going in and coming out.
Mm. But you kind of breaking it all down to these slots. And
Mhm.
do you need everyone to contribute before this gets confirmed? Or
Yeah, so it has to be the 32 ETH deposits.
Mhm.
Um, and there's a few different ways that this can go. So we have this tool called friend delegation. Some people just want to stake in their friends'
Mm,
validators, and that's okay. So, the node operator can put up their 4 ETH and they can share their BLS key and people can stake directly to the validator. And then on the other hand, we have something called the giant pools, which are super interesting because anybody can put up and say, I want to get derivative ETH or I want to access MEV. And in a first come, first served basis, all of these different LSD networks can actually source capital from this giant pool. Because if somebody doesn't know who, like, if they don't have a node operator that they want to work with in particular, they probably don't care where it goes. They just want to use their derivative ETH on Curve, or they want to use it somewhere else and farm with it. So it doesn't really matter to a lot of people.
hmm Awesome stuff. Okay. What would you say then is your vision going forward for Blockswap?
Yeah, so we want to stay as close to the Ethereum roadmap as possible. And we want to stay, tied in with the Ethereum ecosystem. What we're working on next is a lot of these restaking type protocols. And there's essentially two different types. There's the economic restaking, which is just simply a node operator with a slashable security. This is something our devs have already done. It's simple. There's probably going to be hundreds of these types of restaking networks. But then there's the validator restaking, which I think is very interesting because this allows people to access different parts of Ethereum consensus through these Ethereum validators in the restaking process. And particularly protocols like SSV could benefit because there's really 4 different node operators per one validator. So instantly, these 4 different people have access to additional revenue, where compared to before, there would only be one person.
Wow, sounds really exciting. Yeah. So I hadn't come across that concept yet, actually. I mean, I've come across, restaking and things like
Mhm.
eigenlayer and that, but validator restaking as well. Wow, sounds like the next step up, right?
Yeah, exactly. The way I kind of like to think about it is, there's this economic restaking, which is what a lot of people are kind of wrapping their heads
Mm,
around, which is great. But some people might want to tie in a little bit deeper and get a little bit more robustness. And these two can really work together, where, say, somebody wants to get a subcommittee of validators that are doing validator restaking, where they're tied into the consensus layer. They can have a little, they're based off of Ethereum. Maybe they're run on, SSV, whatever it might be. People might have preferences, but there could be, 10 or 20 of these validators. Um, but that doesn't mean that there's a ton of economic security behind 10 or 20 to run the next big roll up. Now, what they could do then is use the economic restaking to source the majority of that slashable ETH. So they really go hand in hand, um, but they just provide a little bit different service, and a little bit different level of security.
hmm Okay. Um, let's move on then. So it would be great to touch on a bit, some questions about how Blockswap is kind of working with SSV, just highlight our relationship there. So firstly, what would you say is the importance of DVT and how are you implementing that into your servers?
Yeah, so we always have been a big fan of DVT, and the way that we've used SSV in the past was about a year and a half ago. We ran our first testnet, and SSV was also on testnet. And we started using the SSV interface. We're like, this is so easy. This is amazing. Where we were able to onboard a bunch of people who have never even known what the difference between a node and a validator by running them through Stakehouse. And then just when they're like, how do I set up a node or what is this? We could just have them go to SSV and it simply took care of everything for them, which was incredible. So the DVT, as it's becoming more and more a core part of Ethereum infrastructure, that's something that we want to continue to emphasize and to build around and to not kind of push off to the side because people are going to want to have the security of multiple people running a single validator.
Definitely. I think that's a big part of it. Yeah, there's the security, and as you said, like the zero coordination. I think these are really
Mhm.
beneficial aspects. Um, what would you say then? How does kind of working with SSV help you to achieve your goals going forward?
Yeah, so I think what we can see, is that with a lot of these different LSD networks popping up through Stakehouse, I think it'd be really great to see some of the community start to push people into SSV, because now that SSV is on mainnet, people could create an LSD network and say, hey, I just want people to run SSV on the back end of this LSD network. And when they would do this, they would have the robustness of both the networks. People could be liquid staking on one hand with, derivative
Okay,
specific
let's
validate.
move on. So we just covered a few points about why, how the relationship with Blockswap and the SSV is, helping you to achieve your goals. So the next one, I'd just like to get your opinion basically on a few things. So what do you think right now are some of the biggest challenges in the staking industry?
I think some of the biggest challenges that are starting to come up is um, there's this talk about, decentralization. How can we make sure that everything gets fragmented enough so that the whole Ethereum network maintains what it's meant to do, and that's be decentralized. And then the other thing that I think is going to come more into focus, and it might be a little bit different, is this whole concept of restaking. And what does that mean for ETH? What does that mean for Ethereum validators? And how can we get all of these players as part of this restaking?
Yeah, very important points, definitely.
Hmm.
So I know you touched on quite a bit about restaking now, just
Hmm.
previously. So would you let us, from the decentralization angle, how would you say Blockswap is addressing that?
Yeah, I think that Blockswap, um, what we do is all of our products are compatible with everybody. If we take a look at Stakehouse, as soon as it came out, all validators were able to run any infrastructure or client that they want. They can use any DVT network out of the box. And we're going to do the same thing with Blockswap Cloud, which is the restaking, where any validator can join. It doesn't matter where it is, where we can say if somebody's a solo staker or if they're, a large staking conglomerate, it doesn't matter. Everybody can join the same, except the concept again of this DVT in restaking, where these people are a little bit supercharged. They have the extra ability. They have just a fraction of a validator, and they have that access, and they can get access to Ethereum on their node, each person from a single validator, which could actually really help decentralize the restaking a little bit more by pushing off these different responsibilities to more individuals.
Yeah, sounds awesome. I remember earlier you said that anyone can stake in any validator, right? Like
Mhm.
just that choice. So is there a risk then that if you've got like the top performing validators, people only invest in them, which could lead to centralization issues, or are you kind of addressing that in a certain way, or what do you think about that?
I mean, that's an interesting thought. I guess
Mm.
I haven't thought about that before. But the thing is, when you say invest in a particular validator, basically anybody can invest in any validator. But once they get that derivative ETH token
Hmm.
on the other side, they're able to curate validators. So yeah, yes, people might want to curate particular validators that are yielding at particular rates. Um, but at the same time, a lot of people aren't going to care as much if the validators aren't performing as well, because they're just going to want to go out there and say, I'm farming, or I'm doing whatever it might be. There's different protocols that I can get more value out of my derivative ETH than actually curating a validator's yield specifically to myself.
Makes sense because there's the dual benefits, right? There's
Hmm.
the one like the validator side, but there's also the token itself, what you can do with that, right? And use that elsewhere. Makes perfect
Yeah.
sense. And where do you see things heading then over the next year in the staking ecosystem?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more of the stake come in. We've already seen that after withdrawals were enabled, the amount of stake goes up. And I think that we're going to continue to see that number rise. And it really depends on some of this other infrastructure and how it develops on where that stake's going to go in. Um, Maybe a lot more of the stake comes into DVT if the whole restaking narrative starts to play out, or maybe more people want to become solo stakers. Um, But what I think people are going to want to see is how can they make the most yield. I mean, that's what everybody wants. That's why people are staking, but they're looking for how can I make the most yield with this asset that I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And one final question is, so what are some key innovations that are happening in the LST space right now?
Yeah, the key innovations in the LST space. Um, well, I think where we're starting to see things move, which is really great, is towards some of these DVT networks. It's getting off of relying on specific individuals and kind of spreading out some of that risk. Um, so I think it's kind of important to note that, I'll refer to LSTs as, the majority of like liquid staking tokens, but then LSDs as derivatives when you can say that, this particular asset represents this other particular asset that's a derivative versus a token. So, in the sense of LSTs, I think it's about trying to decentralize that as much as possible. And I think we'll start to see trends and people pushing more towards that.
Fantastic stuff. Okay, so that's all my questions. So thank you for joining us, Derek. I really enjoyed learning more about Blockswap, and your service sounds fantastic. So for anyone who's interested in getting more involved, I'd recommend to go and check out your website. And yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Sean, for having me here. This was
Yeah.
this was great.